Good morning students. In this session I am going to explain you how civil disobedience movement was taken by these different social communities of our country and how these social groups participated in the civil disobedience movement. At the same time I am going to answer you a number of questions like why did they join the movement, or what were their idols, or what did Swaraj mean to them. So we will take each social group one by one and we'll see how these groups they participated in the civil disobedience movement. So to begin with the first group, that is the rich peasant communities. Now children, in the countryside, these rich peasant communities included Patidars of Gujarat and the Jats of Uttar Pradesh. They were very active in this movement, and there was a reason behind it, because being a producer of commercial crops, they were very hard hit by the trade depression and falling of the prices. So it was during this time they found it impossible to pay the government's revenue, and at the same time the refusal of the government to reduce the revenue demand. So this led to a widespread resentment, means that it became difficult for them to pay the revenue, and top of that the British government refused to reduce the revenue. So this created an anger among these peasants and they participated in this movement. Now these rich peasants, they became an enthusiastic supporter of civil disobedience movement, as for them the fight for Swaraj was a struggle against high revenues. But they were deeply disappointed when the movement was called off in 1931 without the revenue rates being revised. So the reason for which they joined this movement could not be fulfilled. So these rich peasants, they were very much disappointed with this civil disobedience movement. Then comes the poor peasantry, that is the poor farmers. They were not just interested in lowering of the revenue, but children, many of them were small tenants and they were cultivating a land that they had rented from the landlords, because they do not have their own land. So they have taken the land on rent, and as the depression continued, where the prices of the crops failed and the cash income that dwindled, the small tenants found it difficult to pay their rent. So during this movement, their expectation was that they wanted the unpaid rent to the landlord to be remitted, means that should not be taken by the landlords, and they joined a variety of radical movements for this reason. But apprehending of raising issues that might upset the rich peasants and landlords, the Congress was unwilling to support no rent campaigns. That means that Congress did not supported these poor farmers, as according to the Congress they were not willing to support these poor farmers, because somehow they knew that if they are going to support them, then the rich peasants, they might get upset. So the relationship between the poor peasants and the Congress remained very uncertain. Now comes let's see about the business class. How did they reacted towards this civil disobedience movement? Children, let's see how they relate themselves with the civil disobedience movement. And let me tell you that during the First World War, these Indian merchants and industrialists, they had made a huge profit and they all have become powerful. Now they all were very much interested in expanding their business. So they now reacted against colonial policies let's say that restricted their business activities. So they wanted a protection against the imports of foreign goods. And at the same time, a rupee sterling, that is foreign exchange ratio, that would discourage the imports. So what they did, they organized themselves. They organized themselves in the interest of the business and they formed Indian Industrialist and Commercial Congress in the year 1920 and the Federation of the Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries, that is FICCI, in 1927, which was led by the prominent industrialists like Purushottam Das, Thakur Das and G.D. Birla. Now these industrialists, they attacked the colonial control over the Indian economy and they supported the civil disobedience movement. They supported it when it was first launched and they gave financial assistance and refused to buy or sell imported goods. But you know that most of the businessmen, they came to see Swaraj as a time when colonial restrictions on business would no longer exist and they could freely do trade. But after the failure of a roundtable conference, the business groups were no longer interested in this movement as they were worried about this prolonged movement which was disrupting their business. So this was how the industrialists took this civil disobedience movement. Then let's see how the industrial workers, they took this movement. The workers who were working in the industries, now these workers, they did not participate in this civil disobedience movement. Children, a large number of the working class, industrial working class did not participate except the industrial workers in Nagpur region. As the industrialists came closer to Congress, so workers remained aloof because industrial workers believed that as industrialists are along with the Congress, so Congress will not support us. But in spite of that, some workers did participate in the civil disobedience movement. And they came out with the Gandhian programs like boycott of foreign goods as part of their own movement against low wages and poor working condition. There were a number of strikes by railway workers in 1930 and dock workers in 1932. And you know that in 1930, thousands of workers in Chota Nagpur tin mines wore Gandhi caps and participated in protest rallies and boycott campaigns. But children, unfortunately, Congress was reluctant to include workers' demand as a part of their program of struggle, as it felt that this would alienate industrialists and divide the anti-imperial forces. As the reason that the Congress was along with the industrialists. Industrialists was supporting the Congress, so the Congress did not, included the demands of these industrial workers as a part of their movement. And the very interesting part is that in this civil disobedience movement, there was a large-scale participation of women. Do you know, during Gandhi's salt march, thousands of women came out of their homes to listen to him. They participated in protests, marched, manufactured salt, picketed foreign clothes and liquor shops. And children, many of them went to jail. And in urban area, these women, they were from high caste families. And in rural, they came from rich peasant household. So they were moved by Gandhi call and they began to serve the nation as believing their sacred duty. But this increased public role, did not necessarily mean any radical change in the way of position of a woman in the society as it was visualized. As in the society, women were taken to stay at home and look after the family. So Gandhiji was also convinced that it was the duty of women to look after the home and be as good mothers and good wives. And for a long time, the Congress was reluctant to allow women to hold any position of authority within the organization. So children, this was how the different social groups or the communities, they took the civil disobedience movement according to their own interest. Thank you.